Today's class is going to be focusing on stretching, lengthening, and relaxing. You can start in any comfortable seated position. If you've got some blocks or bolsters, you can sit cross-legged on the blocks if that feels good. You can extend your legs forward or open them out a little bit on the blocks. Just do whatever feels good. And once you get settled, eyes can be open or closed. Place your hands on your rib cage. And we'll start to take some deep 360 breaths. As you inhale, feel your ribs expand in all directions. As you exhale, work on fully emptying the breath, letting it all the way out. Really breathe into the sides of your ribs, breathing into the front and back of your ribs, letting the breath all the way out as you exhale. See if you can feel the ribs expand into your hands as you breathe in, creating as much space as you can for the lungs and for the breath. Couple more breaths like this. If you're on blocks or a bolster, go ahead and make your way off of them. And we're going to come into something called a ballet sit. Both knees will be bent. Our left knee is bent in front of us and the right knee is bent behind. So any amount, that left hip is going to be externally rotated and the right hip, which is behind you, is going to be internally rotated. To make this more comfortable, you are welcome to use a block or a bolster here under that left hip or under the left knee to just create a little bit more space in the hips. The goal is to keep the pelvis pretty neutral with both hips down. And we'll start in a side bend. So bring that left hand down, right arm will stretch up and over. Let your left ear release to the shoulder to release the neck. Breathing into the right side of the ribs. Come up and we'll switch sides. Right hand down, left arm stretches up and over. Feel that stretch and lengthening along the left side of the torso while we stretch the hips. Come back up. Now both hands will come forward. You can use a block or two here to lengthen the arms. Really keep that long spine and any amount, hinge forward. So without moving the hips, keep that long spine. We're going to hinge forward toward the front leg and then back up. Really be aware that the spine stays long so we're not rounding the back. Getting a little bit more into that left hip stretch. Now this time as you hinge forward any amount, you're going to stay down. Do whatever feels good with the arms. You can be on fingertips. You can lower all the way down to your forearms if that feels good. Focusing on that 360 breath, breathing into the rib cage, front, side, and back. Ease out of your stretch and we'll switch sides. Swing the legs around so that your right knee is in front, left knee is behind, and just notice any differences between the right side and the left side. Don't worry about forcing that right shin to be parallel to the front of the mat. Find whatever feels comfortable as long as the hips both stay down on the ground. Side bend over toward the right, right hand comes down, left arm stretches up and over. Let the neck release, ear to the shoulder, or bring your gaze straight down toward the ground if that feels better on your neck. Switch sides for your side bend, left hand down, right arm up and over. Feel that length along the right side of the torso as you breathe into the right side of the ribs. Keeping both hips down. Lift up out of that side bend, start to walk the hands forward. Again, you can use any props to find a little bit more length in the spine. Hands can rest on blocks or a bolster, maybe a stack of books. You can come onto the fingertips, onto the palms, maybe lowering down to the forearms. And we'll do that same thing, keeping your long spine. Hinge forward toward that front leg, holding that neutral pelvis. Lift back up a couple times, hinging forward, lifting back up without rounding. And then you can stay in your stretch without forcing it. Feel that 360 breath into your rib cage. Breathing into the sides of the ribs, front of the ribs, and back of the ribs. Come up out of your stretch, swing your legs around into a quadruped. We'll start to stretch it out with cat-cow, so you can either have your palms down with your fingers facing forward, you can turn your fingers out to the side or even backwards as you cat-cow for a little bit more of a wrist stretch while you stretch out the back. Just take any option that feels good as you arch and round your back. Focus on that big breath into your rib cage, front, side, and back as you breathe in. Expanding into the ribs. Full exhales. Now we'll bring the fingers to face forward again if they were turned to the side or backwards. And we'll step the right foot through for a low lunge. Set up with your neutral pelvis, neutral spine. So really feel the back of the skull right over the shoulder blades, right over the pelvis. Firm that left glute. We're going to focus on our shoulder blades. Lift both shoulder blades up toward the ears. Squeeze them in toward the spine. And then slowly draw them down the back, maybe in little chunks, down, down, down. Lift the shoulder blades up toward the ears. Squeeze them in. Draw them down, down, down. You're going to keep doing that, getting that full range of motion for your shoulder blades. Lifting up, squeezing in, and drawing all the way down the back. Now let's roll the shoulder blades back one at a time. Really just trying to free up any tight tissue around the shoulder blades or between the shoulder blades. Continue to hold nice and tight in that left glute. Working on keeping that pelvis in your upright position. Now plant the hands either down or on a block or two. You can come to fingertips to lengthen the arms. And we'll just come to an active hamstring stretch. Try not to round your back at all. Keep your neutral spine. So notice what your pelvis is doing, your shoulder blades and your neck. And we'll point and flex that right foot, which is going to help keep us active, making it more of a dynamic movement instead of just statically stretching that right hamstring. Really think about keeping the pelvis level. So in this position, your right hip crease is moving back, torso is towards your right thigh, meaning your right hip is flexed. Draw those pelvic points in, keep pointing and flexing. Let's come out of the stretch, shift that right knee forward so it's bent, step it back to quadruped. Left foot will step through into that low lunge. Check in with your neutral spine, feel that right glute really engage. Back of the skull is right over the shoulder blades are right over the pelvis. Moving on to that scapula mobility, lift your shoulder blades up, squeeze them in, and then slowly draw them down the back in little chunks. So tiny little movements drawing down the back. Lift the shoulder blades up toward the ears, draw them in toward the spine, and then down the back, little chunks at a time. Keep doing that same thing, really getting as much movement as you can. Upward with the shoulder blades, so that's elevation. Squeezing them in, that's retraction, and then drawing them down the back, that's depressing the scapula. Move to those shoulder rolls, backwards one at a time, Noticing any differences between your right shoulder and your left shoulder. Hands will come down, maybe to fingertips, maybe to blocks. Now really send that left hip crease back. So we want to be flexed in that left hip where our torso is toward the thigh. Try your very best not to round the spine. Start pointing and flexing that left foot. So when we pull the toes back toward the shin, that's called dorsiflexing. And when we point the toes or point the foot, that's called plantar flexing. So we're doing both, flexing and pointing. Notice the difference in the stretch or sensation behind the leg as you point and flex. That left knee can be as bent as you'd like. Really make sure you're not straightening that left leg if it means the spine is really round. So the goal is to stretch with that neutral pelvis and neutral spine. Coming out of the stretch, really bend that left knee and then step it back into quadruped. You're welcome to be on your palms or your fist if that feels better. And we're just going to mobilize the spine and the torso with some torso circles. So not only are we flexing and extending the spine like a normal cat-cow, we're adding a little bit of side-to-side movement as we do this circular motion both directions, getting into the side seams of the body. Doesn't matter what it looks like, just make it feel good. Step your right foot through your hands. Tuck the left toes under if that feels good on the knee and the foot. Lifting up for your low lunge. Check that neutral pelvis. Check your neutral neck. So we want the front of the throat moving back. Now feel that right foot, so your front foot and your back foot energetically drawing in toward each other, which is going to really activate that left hip flexor. Reach the arms up. Right hand is going to grab onto the left wrist. Now, as you grab onto that left wrist, lift up and feel the whole left side of the body lift up. Take it into a small side bend over toward the right, but keep that left glute really active. Feel your belly button pull back toward the sacrum at the back of the pelvis so that we don't arch the low back or tip the pelvis forward. Really breathing into the right side of the ribs, right side of the torso. Lift up out of that side bend, plant the hands down, untuck the left toes. Swivel your left foot over toward the right side of the mat. Use some blocks if that feels better. We'll come into a groin stretch for the right side of the inner thigh and groin and just start to rock here. So we're letting the knee go further than the ankle, which helps to open up that right groin or right inner thigh, and it helps us work on our ankle dorsiflexion. So that's part of that ankle mobility, which helps the ankle stay really stable, especially when we're standing. So just gently rock forward to whatever degree feels good. Keep it as gentle as you need. Come out of your groin stretch, swivel that left foot around back to center. Hands will come down, and now we'll take the right foot, step it out to the right side of the mat. Again, you have the option to be on fists or palms. Try to parallel that right foot so your toes point straight forward toward the front of the mat. Moving into our adductor rock, so any amount hips will shift back. Pressing into the outer edge of that right foot. Feeling some kind of stretch or pull sensation along the inside of that right leg. So we're stretching into our adductors, which are a group of inner thigh muscles, as we gently rock it back. Really work to move and stretch with that neutral pelvis and neutral spine. So make sure the lower back isn't arching. Check in with what the head and neck are doing. Now we're going to shift back into whatever stretch feels good. You can stay on your hands or fingertips. You can lower onto your forearms. Wherever you're feeling a comfortable but bigger stretch, allowing yourself to take some deep breaths here. Now you have the option to hold or reach your right arm underneath you, adding a little bit of thoracic rotation. But if that's either too much sensation or just too much to think about, stick with just staying out of the twist. Keep pressing into the outer edge of that right foot. Let's come out of the twist. Step that right knee in, and we'll just let the hips wag a little bit side to side, kind of like a dog wagging its tail. So what we're working on is one side of the body is laterally flexing or shortening, and the other side of the body is laterally extending or lengthening. So kind of like a little side bend, side to side, but in a quadruped. Left foot will step through, tuck the right toes under as long as that feels okay. Coming into that low lunge. Now again, energetically draw the front and back foot toward each other to really open up that right hip flexor. Checking in with that neutral pelvis. Reach both arms up. This time left hand is going to grab onto that right wrist. Now really lift up, feeling the whole right side of your torso lift up. Belly button pulls back toward the sacrum at the back of the pelvis. Side bend to the left. So that's that same lateral flexion or shortening on the left side of the body and lateral extension or lengthening on the right side of the body right now. Really firm that right glute. Keep it active. Breathe into the right side of the torso. Lift up out of your side bend, hands come down, swivel that right foot over toward the left side of the mat, coming into those groin rocks. So maybe left hand comes to a block. If the left hand can comfortably reach the ground, put it there. You can even put it on that left ankle to really work that ankle dorsiflexion. So again, make this as gentle as you need, rocking forward into that groin stretch. You might feel it on both sides, both hips. We just want to make sure we're able to breathe without feeling any pain or discomfort. Make sure that as you stretch, that left heel doesn't lift off the mat. So really press that left heel down. Couple more rocks, as small as you need. And then we'll lift up out of that groin stretch, swivel the right foot back around, left foot steps out to the left, point those left toes forward, coming into those adductor rocks. Now, if you've got blocks, feel free to use them. Elevate the hands a little bit, maybe bring the forearms down. So you're just going to take whatever option feels good, even if it's different than what you did on the right side. One side might be a little bit tighter, one side might feel more mobile. So take any option as you rock the hips back and forth, keeping that neutral spine, making sure the back isn't rounding and the head isn't dropping down. So hold that neutral pelvis. Make your way into your stretch and hold it. Keep pressing into the pinky toe side of that left foot. Now you can stay with that long spine. You can thread your left arm under any amount for that thoracic rotation. Now don't force that left shoulder down. If it's nowhere near the ground, that's totally fine. Feel that 360 breath into your ribs. One more breath here. Come out of the rotation if that's where you are. Step it into quadruped. Tuck the toes under, lift your hip creases up for down dog. Now you can really shorten the stance here, walking the feet in, making sure the weight stays in the arms and we feel really strong and stable in the shoulders. We're going to do a little swivel here with the pelvis, letting the knees and toes turn to the left, but really lift the armpits up. And then let your knees and toes turn to the right, letting the knees bend, lifting the front ribs up. Now, if this doesn't feel good, take any other option or just hold your downward dog. If it feels good to make this even bigger, you're going to keep the swivel with the feet, the knees, and the pelvis, but just bend the knees even more, almost thinking butt to heels. Walk your hands back to a happy squat. Use the blocks if that helps you keep your nice long spine. So hips are flexed here. Hip creases are moving back. Knees are just about over the ankles. Spine is long, but if it feels good, you can allow the head to release a little bit. Maybe gently moving the head and neck if that feels good. If the hands can touch all the way down, you can release the head that way. But really check that you're pressing firmly into the heels and toes. Use your glutes. We're going to rise to stand without curling up the spine. Check your posture here. We're going to do a little hip mobility as we walk forward. Flex your right hip, tighten that left glute. Let your right knee and hip swing out to the right and then flex it again, bringing it forward. Step it down, pick up your left foot, let it swing out to the side, bring it forward. Step it down, flex the right hip, swing the hip out to the side and then back to the front. Step it down, one more, flex that left hip, swing it out to the side, bring it forward, step it down. Bring one hand to the front of the pelvis, one hand to the back, and just kind of sandwich or compact those hands together, front and back, so that we don't arch the low back. Right foot's going to step back. Start with a really small stance, so smaller than a high lunge, and soften that right knee. It's really important that we keep the pelvis neutral for this next movement. We're going to tighten that right glute and work our hip extension. So that's when the hip moves behind the body, but it won't extend if we tip the pelvis forward. So if you feel like you're just locking the knee out when you straighten the leg, the pelvis is tipping forward and you're arching the low back. So really think tailbone down, and any amount you're going to straighten that right leg. You can think about your right hamstring, the back of the leg lifting up toward the ceiling. Whatever visual is helpful to get into that hip extension. So each time you extend the hip and tighten the glute, meaning the hamstring is going to lift or the knee is going to straighten, you should feel a little bit of a stretch or pull in the front of that right hip flexor. So it's a great way to work that active hip extension. Flex or stretch. Turn to the side of your mat. Parallel your feet for side lunges. Now if you've got blocks, feel free to use them. And we'll side lunge, alternating right and left at whatever pace feels good. Think about that long neutral spine. Now do whatever feels good. You can add a little shimmy or sway in the upper body. You can have the hands wherever it feels good, but we still want to work that action of flexing the hips, moving the hip creases back without arching the low back. So really make sure the pubic bone is lifting up toward the belly button, pressing into the feet. Make these feel good, whatever it looks like. And then we'll come to center, coming to a straddle. Hands are welcome to come as high as you want on your blocks. And we're just going to tick-tock the hips, shifting the pelvis side to side, pressing into the feet, and just noticing where you feel a little stretch or pull or sensation, maybe along the inner thigh or the groin. Now use something to support you here as you bring the heels in, toes out any amount, hips are externally rotated. We'll come into a deep squat or malasana. Maybe you're sitting on a chair, a cushion, a block, but really work to keep that nice neutral spine. So we don't want to feel like we're sinking into the hips. We want to still feel like we're active, like we could lift up or move out of this squat if we needed to. Tailbones rooting down. Check your breath. Now notice the positioning of the feet. Make sure you're not just rolling toward the big toe or just the pinky toe. Really press into the heel, the big toe and pinky toe side of the foot. Lift up out of your squat. We're going to turn to the right, lowering the left knee down for a seated twist. So left knee is going to lower all the way down, sitting onto both hips. Now, if it doesn't feel good here to have both hips down or it doesn't feel accessible, kick that left leg out straight. Or sit in any other position where both hips can be down. Reach that left arm up and over for a nice side bend. Again, working that lateral extension on the left side, and then switch. Right hand comes up and over, side bending toward the left, lateral extension on the right side of the torso, neck releases. And now as we stay in this seated twist, let's do those torso circles. So we've done this in quadruped on hands and knees. Same thing here. Just like a cat-cow, we're getting a little bit of spinal extension and flexion, but getting that same lateral extension and flexion as well. Roll the shoulders up and back one at a time. Notice any tension in the upper back. Turn to your left, undoing the twist, and we'll step it all the way back to the front of the mat, checking in with the pelvis, and we'll switch sides. Step your left foot back, make it smaller than your typical high lunge or crescent lunge. Really squeeze the front and back hands together to make sure we're not arching the low back. So we'll start with that left knee nice and bent, holding that triple S. Tighten that left glute to work that left hip extension. So you can see my left hamstring starting to lift up toward the ceiling as I straighten the leg any amount, but the movement's coming from the hip. So don't just try to lock out that left knee by straightening it. Feel that little stretch or pull along the front of that left hip. So as we extend that left hip, we're getting a little hip flexor stretch in the front. Draw those pelvic points in, zipper the pubic bone to the belly. Move at any pace that feels good. But make sure you're getting that sensation in the front of that left hip. Let's turn toward the left side. Grab your blocks if it's helpful, and we'll side lunge. Any pace you want, shifting side to side. Pressing into the feet. Hinging or flexing at the hips, so both hip creases move back, torso comes toward the thighs without rounding. Do whatever variation feels good, whatever it looks like with the arms, the upper body. You can even add a little thoracic rotation through the ribs if that feels good. Couple more. And we'll head into our straddle. Use the block to elevate if that feels good. And again, just shift the pelvis side to side. So it kind of just looks like we're moving into one hip and then the other, but hold that feeling of zippering the pubic bone up toward the belly, trying to keep as long and neutral of a spine as you can. Getting ready for that squat. Heels come in, toes come out, any amount. Hips are externally rotated. Use any props or stay really high in your squat. It can be much higher up like a goddess squat. I just want you to feel stable in the hips. So while we are stretching and releasing the hips, the adductors, the groin, the pelvic floor, we still want to feel active, like we're not sinking into any joints or tendons. Keeping that neutral spine. Checking in with the placement of the feet. We want knees and toes tracking the same direction, so don't force those toes to turn out. If your feet are much more parallel, that's totally fine. Lift up out of your squat, turn to the left, lower that right knee all the way down for your seated twist. Make sure you can comfortably sit on both hips here and that left hip isn't really hiking up off the ground. So of course, option to kick that right or that bottom leg out so that both hips can come down. Right arm stretches up and over, coming into that side bend. Left side of the torso is laterally flexing, right side of the torso is laterally extending. Switching sides, right hand down, left arm up and over. Really feel that length along the left side of your torso as you get that nice side body stretch. Lift up out of that side stretch. Add some torso circles a couple times in both directions. Feeling the spine and the torso move as both hips stay down. And then we'll add those shoulder rolls. One at a time, roll the left shoulder back and then the right shoulder back. moving at any pace, noticing any differences. Maybe you feel a little bit more free in the upper back at this point of class. Unwind to the right toward the front of the mat, coming back to quadruped. Now you have the option to stay on your palms or lower onto your forearms for a forearm cat-cow. Walk the knees in under the hips and start moving through that cat-cow. So we're arching and rounding the back from the pelvis up. But with the forearms down, you can really focus on the thoracic spine, which is the mid and upper part of your back around the rib cage. Shoulder blades are included in that thoracic spine. So really just move at any pace that feels good. Checking in with your breath. We'll come into a quad stretch next if this feels comfortable and accessible. If this in any way feels discomfort on the knees or anywhere, take another option, pause, do whatever feels good. If you have a block, you're welcome to put the block between your ankles or heels and the back of your legs. Hands can maybe stay right next to you at your sides, or you can start walking the hands back to whatever degree feels good in the front of the thighs. So maybe if you walk the hands further back, you'll start to feel that stretch along our quadriceps, the front of our thighs. Really work on keeping the chest open, keeping the neck neutral so we don't want to throw the head back. And wherever you are, whatever it looks like, focus on your breath. So anytime we're stretching or holding any type of sensation that might feel like a stretch or pull, make sure you're not holding your breath or tensing. So we want to be able to breathe through it comfortably. Let's carefully come out of it, and we'll come to a child's pose. Knees can come wide, knees can stay narrow. If you've got blocks, you're welcome to put them under your hands. And just shift the hips back to whatever degree feels comfortable. So although a lot of people consider child's pose a resting pose, it actually takes a considerable amount of hip flexion to be in child's pose with the hips toward the heels. So if your hips are higher up, no worries. Support your hips wherever they are today. Make your way out of child's pose and transition into a supine position on your back. We'll meet there with the soles of the feet on the mat, knees bent. Keep your neutral neck so chin is toward the throat. Let's pick up that left foot, flexing the left hip, and we'll externally rotate to whatever degree feels good for a half happy baby. So don't worry about how bent the knee is or how far the knee is toward the ground. If it's almost completely straight, again, that's totally fine. If you don't even need to grab onto the foot or leg or shin to feel a bigger stretch, don't grab onto it. If you want to grab and pull down or do little straighten and bends of that left leg, you can do whatever feels good. But check that triple S. Make sure your sacrum, the back of the pelvis, is all the way down. Make sure that right hip doesn't pop up off the ground. So you're just going to do whatever feels good as you stretch. Again, maybe that left groin or inner thigh. Letting the pelvic floor lengthen and release. Expanding your breath into all parts of the rib cage. Coming into a figure 4, flex your left foot, cross it over the right knee or thigh. Let's goalpost the arms so we can open the chest. Right foot is welcome to stay on the ground, or you can pick up that right foot, coming into a deeper stretch for that left hip. If you want to add a little bit more movement, you can internally and externally rotate that right hip. And just notice if you feel a deeper stretch in the left hip as you move that right hip around a little bit. Another option is to gently rock side to side along the sacrum. So you're just going to do whatever feels best. Release it down, and we'll do that all on the right side. Check your triple S as you flex the right hip, picking up the foot. Any amount, externally rotate at that right hip joint. Again, leg can be straight or bent, wherever you're feeling a nice stretch that's not too deep that you're tensing. You can grab on to the hamstring, the knee, the shin, the foot, or nowhere at all. And just ease into your stretch. You can stay still. If it feels good, you can extend the leg a little bit straighter, just straightening and bending that right knee if that feels like a good option today. Making sure that left hip stays down, so we want to hold that neutral pelvis even here while we stretch. Not letting the low back arch. Not letting that left hip lift up off the ground. Check in with that slower, more expansive breath into your rib cage. Let's do one more huge breath here. And we'll cross it over for figure 4. Right ankle crosses over that left knee or thigh. Keep the right foot flexed. Goalpost the arms to open the chest. Chin is towards your throat. Now again, you can do anything that feels good. You can internally and externally rotate that left hip. So it kind of looks like that left shin is just windshield wipering side to side. You can hold and rock side to side along the sacrum if that feels good. Do whatever feels good for that right hip, even if it's something different than you did on the other side. Release it down out of your stretch. If you've got a block, you can use it for this next stretch. It's totally optional. We're going to come into a little hip extension stretch. So if you'd like to put the block right under the sacrum, we're going to hug that left thigh in toward the torso. So that's flexing the left hip. You can grab wherever it feels comfortable. That might be behind the left thigh. It might be on top of the left shin or the knee. Now this might be enough with your right knee bent. If it feels good, try to extend that right leg out long. So if you are on the block, that's going to get more into that right hip extension. So you might feel a little bit of a stretch or pull on the front of that right hip or hip flexor. If you don't have the block, that's totally fine. Hold that sacrum either on the ground or on a block. Right foot will slide back in and we'll lower the left foot down. Switching sides, hug the right thigh in. So that right hip is flexing, thigh comes toward the torso. Grab wherever you can grab on that right leg and really pull it in toward the torso. Stay with that left knee bent or slide the left leg out along the ground. Now, if you happen to be with the block under your sacrum and it's a little bit too much in the front of that left hip, just lift off the block and do it without the block. Feel free to add some ankle rolls here if that feels good. Let's release it. Both knees will bend. If you are on the block, carefully lift off the block. Use your glutes to lift up. And then you can hug the knees in and rock side to side, or you could do the same thing staying on the block if you've got it. Let's come into a full happy baby. So just like we did with one leg at a time, we're going to lift both legs up, externally rotate the hips any amount. You can stay completely still and breathe. You can rock side to side, anything that feels good. And then whenever you're ready, make your way into whatever Shavasana looks like today, using any blocks or props if you have them, using nothing at all. Knees can stay bent, legs can extend out. Wherever you are, let your eyes softly close. Relax the space between your eyebrows. Unclench your jaw, maybe wiggling it around a little bit. With each exhale, feel the whole body soften. Letting go of any tension in the body as you breathe out. You can stay here in Shavasana as long as you'd like.